Why are there royal families? The institutions of royalty have been around for ages. Its origins can be traced back to medieval Europe's feudal regimes. During feudalism, a few extremely powerful landowners gained vast swaths of property by military means, or sometimes purchase. The powerful landowners rose up the ranks to become high-ranking lords, with one of them being proclaimed king. This was most likely accomplished through a show of military might, political maneuvering, or a mixture of the two. These lords, as powerful as they were, commanded far too much land to manage on their own. They would appoint vassals, which were lower-ranking nobles, who were given property and the wealth generated by it, usually through rents paid by commoners or profits from farming the land they owned. In exchange, the vassal would serve as the territory's administrator. In the feudal system of medieval Europe, a vassal or liege subject is a person who is considered to have a mutual obligation to a lord or monarch. Military support by knights was frequently exchanged for particular rights, which usually included land held as a tenant or fief. Similar systems in other feudal societies are likewise referred to as feudal societies. A key aspect of feudalism was the fief. This was heritable property or privileges awarded by an overlord to a vassal, who held it in fealty, or in fee, in exchange for a type of feudal allegiance and service, usually given through personal homage and fealty ceremonies. The fees were primarily lands or revenue-producing real estate held in feudal land tenure, which are known as fiefs or fiefdoms. However, anything of value, including government offices, exploitation rights, such as hunting or fishing, commercial monopolies, and tax farms, may be retained in fee. From the 9th through 15th centuries, feudalism, or the feudal system, flourished in medieval Europe. It was a system of legal, economic, military, and cultural practices. It was a method of organizing society around ties arising from the ownership of land, in exchange for service or work. Feudalism and the institution it represented were not thought of as a formal governmental structure by the people who lived during that time. But that's essentially what it was. A broader definition of feudalism encompasses not only the obligations of the warrior nobility, but also the obligations of all three estates of the realm, nobility, clergy, and peasantry, all of whom were bound by a system of manorialism. During the Middle Ages, manorialism, also known as the manor system or manorial system, was a form of land ownership in portions of Europe, particularly England. The lord of the manor and his dependents resided and governed a rural estate. A large, sometimes fortified manor house, and a community of laborers who farmed the surrounding land to support themselves and the lord. As commercial activity increased, these workers were able to meet their responsibilities through labor hours or monetary payment. Manorialism arose from the late Roman Empire's Roman villa system, and was frequently employed in medieval Western and Central Europe. Manorialism, once a vital part of feudal society, was gradually supplanted by the emergence of a money-based market economy and new types of agricultural contract. Each vassal was given a title, although he did not have any direct political influence at first. Because a vassalage was effectively property given to someone by a higher-ranking ruler. The rules of succession evolved along the same lines as inheritance rules. Whenever a vassal died, his heirs received his property, including his title and responsibilities to the monarch. This structure spawned a variety of intricate traditions and ceremonies over time. Since Europe was the only place with a true feudal structure, monarchies are mostly found there. However, Japan's shogunates were markedly similar, which is why the country has an imperial system and has many characteristics similar to European monarchy. During the majority of the era from 1185 to 1868, the military dictators of Japan were known as shoguns. Shoguns, who were ostensibly appointed by the emperor, were generally the rulers of the country. However, this was not the case during the Kamakura period. This period was a time in Japanese history during which the Kamakura shogunate was formed at Kamakura by the first shogun, Minamoto Yoritomo, in 1192. The formation of the samurai or warrior caste and the institution of feudalism in Japan are associated with this time. Throughout Europe in the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries, republicanism began to erode conventional royal rule. Representative democracy was the hallmark of republicanism. A government in which voters elect representatives to establish and amend the laws that govern them rather than having a direct vote on the laws. Cleisthenes, the Athenian leader, instituted a set of political changes known as demokratia, or rule by the people, from demos, people, and kratos, power, in 507 BC. It was the world's first known democracy. In the late Middle Ages, republicanism grew in Europe when a number of states developed from medieval communes and adopted a republican system of administration. The merchant class had come to prominence in these mainly tiny, but prosperous trade nations. During the Renaissance, Europe had been divided into monarchs and republics, with the former dominated by a land-owning aristocracy and the latter by a mercantile class. In some countries, like Denmark, the transition to a democratic form of government occurred gradually and quietly. In others, it occurred through a violent revolution, like in France. When monarchists achieved political control over republicans, ousted and exiled rulers would frequently return years later. The King of England, Charles I, was executed during the English Civil War in the mid-1600s. Charles II, his heir, was deported to France. He ultimately returned, but the power of the English monarchy was weakened, and Parliament gained significant political influence. In the Middle East, royalty developed in a slightly different fashion. While military and political maneuvers were still used to gain dominance, politics and religion have become more entwined. The caliph was the head of state, and his authority was based on Islamic law rather than political strength or wealth. Sultans ruled beneath the caliph. A sultan is a religious leader, a military commander, and a minor king, although not a priest. Many Middle Eastern sultanates have followed the European style of constitutional monarchy in recent years, and some sultans have changed their names to kings to reflect their more secular position. Much of the concept of royalty is based on a social class structure. The title lord is derived from an Old English term that means bread keeper, referring to the Germanic tribal practice of a chieftain distributing food to his subjects. The existence of a class structure may be traced back to ancient Egypt, when aristocratic status was defined by one's ability to read. The wealthy were at the top of the social ladder, while the poor and slaves were at the bottom. However, the class system was not inflexible. A man from humble beginnings may rise to positions of power. Men and women, including persons from all socioeconomic strata, were recognized as equal under the law in ancient Egypt. And even the lowest peasant had the right to petition the highest official and his court for remedy. The concept of social class has long shaped the social structure of the United Kingdom, and it continues to influence British society today. A social class is a set of notions in the social sciences and political theory in which people are divided into hierarchical social groups. The high, middle, and lower classes are the most common. Education, wealth, occupation, income, and membership in a particular subculture or social network can all influence social class membership. Different countries have different mechanisms in place for determining who is royalty and who isn't. Nowadays, these systems are subject to change. In certain societies, royalty is straightforward. Members of the governing family are royal, whereas the rest of the population is considered common. Others with aristocratic titles such as Duke or Baroness may exist, but they are no more royal than the kid bagging groceries at the grocery store. So, why is there royalty? Of course, there were many factors that existed which lead to the concept of royalty as we know it today. In a nutshell, royalty were landowners that successfully gained and built power and influence by owning land. Other people needed to raise livestock and crops and live in exchange for protection and the sustenance they farmed and lived on that land. Royals served essentially the same purpose as government. Besides conglomerating as much power for themselves as they possibly could, they also kept order and provided a safer life for much of the peasant class. What do you think about royalty and royal families? Let us know in the comments.